I never imagined I'd end up as the local champion for challenging our HOA president. Yet when Karen Wilkinson set her sights on the Jensen family during their son's battle for survival, somebody had to take a stand. It all began on a scorching Tuesday afternoon as I spotted workers installing a temporary ramp at the Jensen's house. Their 8-year-old boy, Tyler, had leukemia, and following his latest chemotherapy session, he'd require wheelchair accessibility for several months. At a minimum, the Jensens were already overwhelmed with mounting medical expenses and alternating overnight shifts at the hospital. The absolute last complication they needed was HOA nonsense. But nonsense arrived regardless, embodied by Karen Wilkinson, our mid-50s HOA president. Complete with her trademark platinum blonde bob and constantly tightened lips. I was tending to my front yard flowers with the hose when I caught sight of her striding across the road. Clipboard clutched firmly, expensive sunglasses propped on her nose. Even though the sky was overcast. "Excuse me," she announced to the crew, her tone laced with that artificial sweetness that invariably signaled impending conflict. "Do you possess approval from the Architectural Review Committee for this construction?" She pointed toward the ramp with clear disdain, as though it were some fairground attraction instead of an essential health aid. One worker politely described the circumstances, referencing Tyler's illness, but Karen remained unaffected. "Rules are rules," she declared, with a casual flick of her perfectly manicured fingers. "The Jensens must file the appropriate paperwork and await official approval. This has to be removed right away." I was stunned by her words. Placing my hose aside, I walked over to get involved. "Karen, you can't possibly mean that," I replied, striving to keep my tone steady, even as frustration built inside me. "Tyler's discharging from the hospital tomorrow. He physically can't get into his house without this ramp." Karen faced me with that forced grin that stayed far from genuine warmth. "Oh, hi there, Mark. I appreciate your worry, but nobody gets to bypass the HOA guidelines. They agreed to the covenants upon buying the property." She patted her clipboard emphatically. "Crucially, if exceptions start happening, where's the limit? Houses painted in rainbow hues, vehicle fixes on driveways. Total anarchy. This qualifies as a medical necessity," I argued back, sensing my usual calm demeanor fading. "The Fair Housing Act mandates reasonable accommodations for disabilities. This has nothing to do with looks, it's about letting a kid access his own front door." Karen's gaze sharpened through her high-end lenses. "Are you practicing law these days, Mark? The Jensens have to follow the correct procedures. Full stop. If that ramp remains past tomorrow morning, fines of $100 daily will apply." With those words, she spun sharply on her heel and marched off, leaving the crew visibly awkward and me seething with rage. Right away, I snapped pictures of the ongoing ramp work and went straight to the hospital to talk with David and Lisa Jensen. After I recounted the encounter, Lisa broke down crying. They'd actually emailed the HOA the previous week, notifying them of the temporary ramp, yet got zero reply. David appeared utterly drained, that profound exhaustion born from witnessing your child's pain while desperately holding everything together. "We can't handle fines added to our burdens," Lisa murmured softly, gripping her husband's hand tightly. "But Tyler's returning home tomorrow. How can we manage? Haul him up the steps while he's hurting from chemo." "You won't need to," I assured them firmly. "Karen's exceeding her authority, and she realizes it. Allow me to deal with this." That same evening, I conducted thorough research. I printed key portions of the Fair Housing Act, the Americans with Disabilities Act, plus several legal precedents where HOAs faced successful lawsuits for blocking reasonable medical accommodations. I additionally uncovered a medical emergency exemption in our very own HOA bylaws that Karen had deliberately ignored. The following morning, I was prepared as Karen showed up at the Jensen residence, wielding her clipboard and a self-satisfied look. The ramp stood intact, and Tyler was due home later that day. I specifically warned about the repercussions, Karen proclaimed loudly, ensuring curious neighbors could hear despite feigning disinterest. $100 each day, effective immediately. I approached calmly, holding my prepared folder. "On the contrary, Karen, I've compiled some material you ought to review." I passed her the packet of documents. This ramp falls under federal protection as a reasonable accommodation for medical needs. Moreover, Section 7, Paragraph 3 in our bylaws allows exemptions for temporary medical installations HOA notification, which the Jensens submitted last week. Karen's cheeks reddened as she scanned the pages. This doesn't apply. The Architectural Review Committee must still evaluate the design and materials. The committee gets 14 days for emergency requests. I responded evenly. Without a timely reply, temporary approval is deemed granted. It's explicitly stated in the bylaws. By now, a handful of neighbors had assembled, observing openly with keen attention. Karen's mouth pressed into an almost invisible slit as she sensed her control slipping. This matter isn't finished, she snapped quietly, thrusting the documents back. I'll raise it at tonight's board meeting, I responded with a courteous smile. I'll attend as well, and I've extended an invitation to a Fair Housing Commission representative to participate. They expressed strong interest in our HOA's approach to medical accommodations. It was purely a bluff, but Karen had no way of knowing. She departed abruptly without further comment. Soon after, several neighbors approached to voice solidarity with the Jensens. One shared how Karen had penalized them over a basketball hoop in the incorrect black shade. Another recounted a citation for planting flowers not listed as approved. That night, the regular HOA board meeting drew an unusually large turnout. News of the Jensen ordeal had circulated widely, and opinions were dividing. The majority backed the family, though Karen retained her dedicated supporters, mainly longtime residents convinced that lax enforcement would tank property values. Karen opened the session, her voice oozing command as she fine-tuned the microphone. Before moving through the agenda, I wish to address a grave infraction at 47 Maple Drive. The Jensen residence has erected an unauthorized structural modification lacking required authorization. I rose promptly. Point of order. This topic isn't included on the distributed agenda, meaning, per our bylaws, it cannot be subject to a vote this evening. Karen's gaze sparked with clear annoyance. This qualifies as an emergency enforcement matter that the board may handle during any session. She then proposed designating the temporary wheelchair ramp at the Jensen home as a medical necessity. Exemption per Section 7 of our bylaws. I responded confidently, aware that the majority in the room backed me. Their son is returning from the hospital today following cancer therapy. A low ripple of whispers moved across the attendees, and I noticed Karen grasping that she was no longer steering the discussion, yet rather than conceding, she intensified her stance. The visual appeal of our community impacts every resident's property values, she maintained, her volume increasing. If we permit one unauthorized addition, before long we'll see sheds, carports, and all sorts of unsightly features. The Jensens were aware of the regulations when they purchased here. At that moment, Lisa Jensen, who had quietly entered and taken a seat toward the rear, rose to her feet. Her voice trembled a bit, but it resonated strongly throughout the space. My son simply wants to return home from the hospital with a measure of dignity. The ramp is only temporary, just as we pray his wheelchair use will be. Is your property value truly more important than my child's health and comfort? The room grew completely quiet. Karen scanned the faces around her, detecting the changing atmosphere, but continued with astonishing insensitivity. This isn't solely about one child. It's about preserving the standards of our entire community. The fine remains in effect until formal approval is issued. David Jensen now stood next to his wife. Our son has been battling leukemia for 7 months. We sent our request electronically last week, complete with medical documentation. We've complied with your required processes. Karen rifled through her documents, evidently unsettled. I have no record of any such submission. That's when I revealed my strongest evidence. I displayed an email on the projector screen at the front. It was the Jensen's initial request, along with Karen's personal response. Received. We'll review. You confirmed receipt yourself, Karen, I stated evenly. And per our bylaws, the committee then has 14 days to reply, or the temporary request gains automatic approval. Karen's complexion shifted from flushed pink to intense crimson. She rose suddenly, accidentally toppling her water bottle. This meeting is procedurally invalid. As president of this association, I determine what counts as an emergency exemption. Actually, interjected a fresh voice from the rear. The bylaws explicitly indicate that medical necessities qualify without further approval. It was Roger Simmons, a retired lawyer who seldom participated in meetings. And refusing reasonable accommodations for a disability, yes, even temporary ones, constitutes a federal law breach that could expose the association to penalties reaching $100,000. The atmosphere in the room altered sharply. Board members shared anxious looks. Karen appeared to realize her authority was slipping, and that's when she committed her critical error. "This is preposterous," she yelled, pounding her palm on the table. "I refuse to allow this neighborhood standards to collapse because of residents who disregard the rules. The Jensens will face fines, and if needed, will impose a lien on their property." She aimed her finger straight at me. "And you're breaching the homeowner conduct guidelines by encouraging defiance against the board. Your own landscaping infractions have been ignored far too long." The room exploded with overlapping voices. Karen banged her gavel repeatedly, calling for order, her expression twisted in fury. When that failed, she took an astonishing action. She strode directly to where the Jensen stood and jabbed her finger inches from Lisa's face. "Your son's illness doesn't elevate you above the regulations everyone else adheres to," she shrieked, utterly abandoning self-control. "Take down that ramp or suffer the repercussions." What followed would eventually spread across 3 major social media sites. Lisa Jensen, the gentle kindergarten teacher who had never spoken loudly in a public setting, firmly swatted Karen's accusing finger aside. Karen inhaled sharply in exaggeration, cradling her hand as though seriously harmed. "She assaulted me. Call 911, demand her arrest." To the astonishment of all present, Karen genuinely retrieved her phone and contacted emergency services, alleging she had suffered a violent assault during a community gathering. The room descended into bewildered hush as she exaggerated the details, insisting on immediate police intervention. 20 minutes later, 2 officers entered, appearing notably unenthusiastic about responding to a homeowner association conflict. They questioned multiple witnesses, each confirming that Karen had initiated aggression by invading personal space with her pointing, and that Lisa had only deflected the intrusion non-violently. What Karen overlooked was that Roger Simmons had captured the entire exchange on his phone, a recording explicitly permitted under our bylaws for documentation. The officers examined the video, which unmistakably depicted Karen's invasive, pointing, and hostile demeanor. To Karen's visible dismay, rather than detaining Lisa Jensen, the lead officer addressed her directly. "Ma'am, are you aware that submitting a false police report is illegal?" "False." "She struck me." Karen objected, dramatically displaying her unmarked hand. "The recording plainly demonstrates you encroached on her space." And she responded with appropriate minimal force. The officer explained steadily. "Furthermore, we've been advised that you're trying to impose housing rules conflicting with the Fair Housing Act." The second officer began documenting details. "We'll need to prepare an official report on this matter. May I see your identification, please?" Karen's color drained from deep red to pale gray. "This is outrageous. I'm the victim in this situation." "Ma'am, your ID, please," the officer insisted more sternly. As Karen rummaged clumsily in her bag, the first officer proceeded. "Submitting a false police report is classified as a misdemeanor in this state, carrying potential penalties of up to 1 year imprisonment and fines reaching $2,500. The room remained utterly still as Karen was escorted outside for the report processing. From the windows, we observed her gesturing frantically, her poise entirely fractured. The leftover board members promptly initiated an emergency ballot. The outcome was unanimous. The Jensen family's temporary ramp received retroactive approval. Karen Wilkinson was stripped of her HOA presidency without delay, and the board delivered an official apology to the family. 3 days afterward, Karen faced formal charges for filing a false police report. with the judge establishing bail at $5,000. As she was guided from the courtroom wearing handcuffs, her high-end sunglasses crooked and her meticulously styled hair in disarray, she spotted me among the spectators. The expression of sheer incredulity and fury on her face as her small domain of control collapsed was an image I'll always remember.